Hi folks, when I first planted raspberries and discussed running pick your own days with other well-respected raspberry growers, their advice was to not do it because they felt the bushes would be damaged and the fruit wouldn't be picked properly. So I'm going to just run you through some basics on how to pick raspberries well in the hope that we'll be able to keep doing this. Right, so first up, what should you bring? Your normal stuff for a hot outdoor day, water, hats, a long sleeve shirt. Some people will find they get scratches on the short sleeve. Raspberries are a thorny bush. They're not like a blackberry, but well, most varieties aren't, some are. So yeah, you might prefer to have a long sleeve shirt so you can roll it down if it bothers you. Sunnies, sunscreen, good sturdy shoes, because there are lots of sticks and other things on the ground. It's mowed, but it's not mulched. A raincoat because it's Tassie, and your picking buckets. What I use is just an ice cream container with two shoelaces tied around the waist. That way you can pick two hands into it. When you're transporting it, you're better off with a shallow bucket rather than a deep one, just so the fruit doesn't squash together in transit. And if you're going any distance, you probably want some kind of esky or cool bag and a cold ice block. So the main thing to remember when you're picking raspberries is that both the fruit and the canes are very delicate. Now these canes here, the ones that are the lighter green colour, as compared to these more woody looking ones, the lighter green colour are this year's growth. And next year they'll look like this, and they have these laterals off it, and that's where the fruit comes from. So these young shoots are actually going to give us the fruit next year. So if you snap these, that's next year's crop that's gone. So when you're picking the berries, you need to be very careful with the new wood as well. Now when you're picking the fruit, you'll find that the very ripe ones, like this, come off quite easily. Whereas a slightly underripe one, this is a little bit more pink, bit of green around the bottom. That's still, in this variety, that's still got a lot of flavour, that berry, but taking it off will actually be, you can see I'm pulling the whole bush there, the whole bush is rough. So if you want to get that off, you really need to support it here. And you can give it a little bit of a pinch and a pull like that, just a little bit of pressure as it comes off. And that way it stops. If I were to pull that, you can see the whole bush is coming. If I were to pull that and snap off that whole section, then I've lost 2 or 3 berries and only picked one. Now whether you pick ripe, very ripe berries or slightly underripe berries, it's obviously your choice, but we just ask that you look after the bushes when you do it. Some varieties I prefer to pick slightly underripe. I find that once they're purple, they've got a bit of that winey flavour, which I'm not so keen on in the fruit. Other people like it that way. Whereas other varieties, I think they're not really worth eating until they're purple. So that's why we encourage you to eat as you pick, so that you actually know what you're getting. Raspberries will ripen off the bush, so once you pick them they will continue to ripen, but they don't usually gain a lot of flavour. The flavour comes from the sun hitting the berries. So yeah, feel free to go through and pick and eat, and yeah, whether you take green ones or ripe ones, that's your call, but please do just be careful when picking that you support the rest of the bush as you pick any less ripe ones. Right, now when you're picking, you can't just go up the edge of a row and pick. I mean, you can, but that's not picking cleanly. So in a situation like this looks like fairly scarce going. There's not a lot of fruit there, a lot of it's been picked, and a lot of it's still coming on, it's nowhere near ripe. But what you'll find if you open up the row is that there'll be some ripe ones inside. Now the way we do this, this is where you need to be careful with the new canes. I find if you just put your arms in there and slide them apart, and then lift things up with the back of your hand, push them up like that. I don't know if you can see it in this light or not, but there's one very ripe one, There's another very ripe one in there. There's one dangling down there. There's a whole bunch of them. Dangling down there. That one's actually a little bit overripe. That's another thing we'd ask. If you do find anything that's overripe, if you're not keen on eating it, it's probably a safe assumption that no one else is. If it's got a hole in one side, it might have been eaten by an insect or a bird. Just pick it off and drop it on the ground, because if that kind of fruit gets overripe or insect eaten, it's likely to rot on the bush. If it goes mouldy, the mould can run through the whole bush. So in that situation, just pick it and drop it off. You will find some that are slightly, this isn't one of them, but you'll find some that are almost dead white around the top, or even the whole side is white. That's usually sunburn. And they're very, very sweet. If you just pick them and eat them, they're delicious. You can of course pick them, put them in your bucket, but they're a lot softer and squishier where they've been burnt, and presumably their shelf life is also a lot less. Right, so those are the main things. Be careful with the canes, be careful with the fruit. Remember that the berries are all through the bush, so don't assume that you've seen them all unless you've actually got down and had a look, because they hide. There's a lot in there, and kids, you have an advantage over mum and dad in some cases, because right down next to the ground you'll also find that they're hiding quite low as well. So the berries grow at all heights. Some of them only adults will be able to reach, some of them it's easier for the kids to reach.